New Level Cap Podcast is a show about fun, friends, game design, and all things otherwise. Your hosts are Marco DeSantos and Brad Telton of Level 99 Games. I'm Chris Solis, your producer, and without further ado, please enjoy the show.
Why, hello, dear listener. It is I, your host, Sir Sylvanus III, welcoming you to this wonderful episode of the New Level Cap Podcast. I have killed Marco and replaced him and all that he stands for. I have also killed Brad and replaced him with a new special guest who goes by the name of
Julian Kulik.
I see Mr. Kulik over here is quite cool indeed, and I've brought him onto the show to... Oh, wait! No! Stop! Oh, guys, this weird guy just came into my recording studio and started recording the podcast by himself. Who am I on the call with?
This is Julian Kulik. I've been doing story and lore writing behind the scenes for the BattleCON Devastation Unleashed Kickstarter.
Ooh, I'm very interested to hear about this. Julian, are there any other names that you might go by that people may know?
People largely know me as Arbco on the Discords, various Level 99 Discords.
I see. So you are the madman who created that 200-plus PDF of just lore bits from Brad and me while recording this podcast.
I think it ended at somewhere plus of 400, 500 pages.
Never mind. Oh my god. This is an article without pictures, right?
Yeah.
It is literally all text.
Right. But I do space things out so that, like, characters aren't divided across pages, cleanly. So there's a fair amount of white space, but all the same, even if you compressed it, it'd still probably be 300, 400 pages, so...
Julian, you crazy boy. So I feel like this is enough, like, understanding for the audience to know that when it comes to lore for Indines, at the very least, you're a god now, right? Is this correct?
I'm more of a demigod. Brad's still the god proper. I'm more of the I suppose archangel, whatever.
Archangel. You're the You're his Gabriel. You're his messenger, so to speak.
Or Hermes to the Zeus, or whatever you want to put it as. But actually, I want to say that this is all your fault, Marco.
Oh, why is it all my fault?
So I'm driving to Gen Con about 2 years ago, and I was listening to the Level Cap podcast, and you guys, I was kind of going back a ways because I kind of been away from it for a while. And you were talking about a fanfic contest around that time. And
nice.
When you did that, you talked about, like, one of the things you were rating people on was the accuracy of their lore. And I do believe my response while sitting there in the car was, how the bleep is anybody supposed to know what the lore is, since it was spread out so far at the time?
Yeah.
And after I came home from Gen Con that year, I was like, okay, let's start putting this together. This should be a simple thing to do. Only like 40 pages or so.
Oh, no.
And I can't leave anything undone when I start it sometimes, so there you go.
You have made a crucial mistake, my friend.
Yeah.
That 40 pages became 400.
Yeah. Yeah, I really underestimated how much there was spread out there amongst all the various sources. So
yeah, I mean, just from word of mouth between me and Brad, I'm pretty sure is a lot already. You had to listen to a lot of the Level Cap podcast just to even get some of those lore tidbits, especially because a lot of the segments were answering lore questions.
And I admit I didn't get all those down, but there's a lot of time spent listening to you on half speed, so you and Brad sound properly drunk, even though you're not. So,
oh my gosh, this is a family-friendly show. No alcohol on this podcast. No, but for serious, I'm so glad you're here, Julian. How does it feel to be on the show that you finally be on this show after listening to, I assume, almost every single freaking episode twice just to get the lore tidbits down?
This whole situation is slightly surreal to me, as you might expect. It's, I worked on the whole lore cyclopedia, as I called it, but I didn't necessarily expect anything to come with it. I was like, oh, that would be nice, but
Yeah, and look at where that got you. You're now lore extraordinaire.
Yeah,
Extraordinaire
it's
for level 99 games. Oh my gosh.
yeah, I've been doing basically like I said, a lot of freelancing, basically taking a lot of the existing stories and bringing them together into something that's contiguous and all works together. So
We've brought you on to get your special set of skills. So tell us, what's the importance of why do we care? Why do you care so much about the lore for these people in this board game fighting game? Isn't it just enough to have cool people punch each other constantly?
well, it is real cool, but it also provides like I would say the first thing that you'll see in story in games, and while you'll see story in so many games, is that it provides context. Like if you're playing Hikaru and you're pulling out his tokens, they could be something and just say like plus 3 power, plus 2 priority, plus 1 range, and have that be that, and just leave you to work out what that means. But because they have like the power is fire, that the extra the extra range is water, the earth is soak. That provides a context. It makes it easier to remember what they do and easier to visualize what's going on in the imagination.
I guess that's true. Also, to be fair, games are boring without context, right? It makes hardly any sense. Like, there's a reason why a lot of people don't necessarily like chess, because the context behind it is so loose, right? Like, how is this a knight? How is this a king? How can the queen teleport across the board? Why does the castle move, right? Like,
it's not an absolute necessity. Sudoku is a thing. Even like chess has like some level. You have the king, you have the knights, and you have the pawns. They represent something, even if it's very loose, and generally most chess players necessarily aren't thinking in terms of armies clashing. They have these kind of shorthand names to give you clues as to how they work.
no, but in reality, you're absolutely correct, right? Like, BattleCon would be boring if instead of Hikaru we had, like he was just he's called Fast Man and he punched thing. Like, it's not as interesting as, half human, half light elemental geomancer with magical, mystical martial arts powers. Like
Right. I mean, imagine if you took Smash and just reduced it to stick figures, doing all the same things you do in Smash, but there's no context, and it probably wouldn't be nearly as successful because people, of course, that's also drawing upon earlier games and earlier attachments to stories, so it's a simplification, but
oh my gosh, it's so true. It's so true. When the context just doesn't fit what you're doing, we had that problem with Neuromile K.
Caramel K?
Yeah, because supposedly, like, it looks like a walking tanker with a goop slime inside.
Right.
So you think, slow and steady wins the race, right? Like, that's what it comes off, because it's literally a walking tank.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the gameplay is most mobile character in the game. I'm like, what? What? Okay. Yeah, so it's really interesting and really weird that way. But regardless, context aside, are there any other important parts?
There's also the idea, and not too many level 99 games are doing this yet. Seventh Cross looks to be doing it in a big way. Story as reward, as in you're like doling out a story that you discover in the means of play. You see this all the time in video games, of course. And you'll see it a lot in games that are board games that are basically
legacy.
Yeah, legacy games. That's what I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, legacy games.
Particularly with stuff that you like open up and that reveals new things. You usually see that a lot in what were called program games or choose your own adventure type games.
Yeah, that's totally true. I definitely feel like level 99 games don't necessarily do this a lot, but there are some. So there's the ever amazing Power Play. Have you played Power Play?
I have not, I admit.
That's fair. Because at the end of the day, the goal of Power Play is never to win, but to create a fun story between you and your friends. And overall, like we talked about video games, but really the big example here is role-playing games. Because literally, the story is just the entire reason you play it.
Yeah.
You don't play D&D or like Powered by the Apocalypse system games and go like, yes, the reason I play this is so that I can pick up a level 6 paladin and get my new level 5 spell or whatever, right? Like, that's not why you do it.
Well, some people really dig that part, but yeah. When I was doing a role-playing game contest recently, and they brought out Power Play as an example. of how to do a smooth story game. So that was kind of like my first time sitting down and reading it. Yeah.
Overall, that's the point of these storytelling games, right? Like, you want to just find out the story, and that's why you keep playing.
And,
or rather, you want to create the story,
yeah,
and that's why you keep playing.
And there's also one thing I want to mention is the idea of story or lore being stretched between like multiple products. It's something you saw a lot in CCGs. The one that will pretty much always be perennial for me for this is Legend of the Five Rings. Since I was into that early on, and they were pretty much, as far as I'm aware, one of the first companies to really start putting a story into their CCG. Every set would advance kind of the global story of the setting, and that different characters would die, or change, or become snake men, whatever.
Okay, snake men, nice.
It got weird, even for a game that was nominally about samurai. But one of the big things they did was, and we'll get more probably a little later on, it was incorporating what fans, they gave fans ways to put input into the game to decide who won a certain battle or who got a certain reward. And so, I mean, before that, you had seen some games like Magic's Artifact, their antiquity set, had story in it, in theory. It had lore elements, but it didn't really lead anywhere. It just kind of was a little bit of flavor to make the cards a little more interesting, but it didn't really hold together in any coherent way. Role-playing games around the same time started doing was the idea of metaplot, in which they would introduce plot elements or lore elements in the initial book, and then in later supplements, you would find out, for example, like more about what the Knights Templar are up to, even though they are only kind of mentioned in the first book, and find out that they're really important to the setting. And then you'll find out about the demons they're fighting in that book, and that leads to the next book, which the demons get out, and now they have to fight, and whatever. And there was a lot of that, and it was interesting more for that, it was almost more a marketing perspective than a play perspective. At least in my experience, a lot of people would just kind of like go, yeah, it's there, but a lot of people wouldn't focus on it. It was just kind of like something for almost like, reading as opposed to playing.
So would you say that this is a huge effect of the fact that stories invest people? Story is important to the games because it means that people want to keep playing. Like, as much as we derided on Magic, in Magic, people are always interested to see what the Planeswalkers are up to, Like, did Jace die, finally? Or, like, is Liliana still a huge jerk? Or, what happened to Nicol Bolas? Is he killing people again? Like, people are interested from set to set to find out, like, what's happening with these Planeswalkers and what they're doing in the lore. And that incentivizes people to play the game more or buy the new sets. So do you feel like this is an important factor of having a story in your game?
Oh, yeah. I mean, nowadays, Magic has, like, these big CG trailers, and when I started playing with these little pieces of cardboard, to think that they would like go this far as to sit down and create these little movies about this this little game that was about summoning, bears, to beat up another wizard.
3 mana 2/2s, 3 mana 2/2s.
But one thing you start getting into is the whole idea of having fans who are invested in it, whether it's like me putting together lore for a book or putting together various wikias. I mean, just look at some mobile game wikias and the amount of like text that's involved in them. But investment, I think, also really comes down to finding ways to introduce things brought in by players, and Magic has certainly done that. Taking little memes and little ideas that they've had and inserting them into cards.
Indines is a world that also kind of does this, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of characters are literally just fan-made characters we decided to adopt, right?
Right, yeah. A lot of them came out of the Kickstarter tiers, I believe, and Devastation. That was like right before I got involved myself. That I go through Blad's lore docs and I get to see all the names associated with it, different characters, and it's a lot more than I knew. A lot of his original characters came out of his roleplay sessions, and from characters his friends played.
Yeah, like Voco. Now it explains so much that Voco was just a player character in a tabletop RPG setting. I'm like rock and roll necromancer with Kamina shades.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if he was an NPC or PC, but yeah.
He is a PC. He's a PC. So, yeah, it's pretty cool and all that stuff. So, but before we delve too deep into BattleCon lore and answer some of your BattleCon lore-related questions, let's take a short break. So, Julian, What do you say before you're about to take a break?
Me personally, or you? Am I trying to remember what's on the podcast?
No, just you personally. Just you personally.
Be back in just a bit.
All right, be back in just a bit.
FanimeCon in the San Francisco Bay Area is coming soon. Come play various tabletop games in the tabletop section, sponsored by Exceed. Play any game and receive a free Ryu vs. Ken demo deck while supplies last. Play in official Exceed organized playside events with other players and test drive any fighter in the game at our demo tables. Bring your A game and see if you can beat our staff in a game of Exceed. We're looking forward to playing with you there.
Why, hello and welcome back. This is still Marco. I'm just using this nefarious voice. Julian, do your most nefarious voice.
Oh, we're going to do some terrible things.
Oh, how terrible.
Very terrible.
Okay, as a writer, I was expecting you to give me something more than just saying very terrible, you know?
I'm on the spot, man.
You could have said heinous or deplorable, but okay, I'll settle for very terrible. Welcome back from the break, everyone. While I'm roasting Julian here, I hope that all of you are prepared to fly by the seat of your pants.
Yep, I am ready.
What's your experience been trying to collate everything for... essentially BattleCon Devastation Remaster, where everything's trying to get fixed, right? So,
you're going to have to do some weeding. There's a lot going on, and to be frank, perhaps not all of it was necessarily meant to be put together happening in one period of time. And for those who aren't aware, there are about, as far as BattleCon goes, there are about 8 different stories. There are 3 stories that are associated with war. Most of them are fairly short stories. You've got 3 stories that are associated with devastation. Those are pretty long, and that's been kind of like the bulk of my work so far. There's one associated with Fate of Indines and Trials of Indines, which is old Reliconers story arc. And then there's another one happening with Wanderers, which we've worked out. And a lot of that kind of existed mainly in kind of outline form. Like what you see, if you look through the rule books, you can definitely see kind of the outlines of a lot of these stories. If you go through, War, it has that separated out into 3 parts, which is, you have, the Erlenmeyer Flask, which is, Carolyn and Lixus fleeing Willat. You have the whole plot line with, I think it's the New Crusade, which is Magdalene and her friends going to stop Rexen from being resurrected.
Which they fail at?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say they technically fail, but I think they learned also that there's probably, it's that perhaps their crusade wasn't so just or important in the first place.
Yeah.
Depending on your point of view, it's justified or not justified. It's kind of one of those interesting things where Rexan's beneficial, but he's not necessarily a good guy, and he's kind of like that. Is it worth having him in power to make sure Gesselheim isn't a total tar hole? So
yeah, he's not a good guy, but he's also not just out there to cause havoc for no reason.
No, he has generally good intentions, and is going to be just utterly ruthless in those service of those intentions. And the other story that's associated with it, which is the one I've been primarily working on first because it leads into a number of devastation stories, is The Dark Behind Her Eyes, which is where Cherry gets resurrected and the Planestalkers have to find her before Oriana and Zabasol can use her for their own purposes.
Which, again, they fail at. Why does everybody keep failing, man?
Because it creates more interesting story beats to follow up later on.
Yeah, to be fair, though, in Devastation, they kind of make up for their mistakes, right? They stop Jenna from resurrecting Greyheart, at the very least.
Yeah, you have the whole Dragon King storyline. You have Well of Souls, which has a lot more to do with the demons and stopping them.
Mm-hmm.
And you have... it's the story where the Planeswalkers are trying to stop Oriana. Where Oriana's getting ready to invade, and they have to pull out all the stops to keep her from wrecking everybody's stuff.
Man, Devastation's really rough, because it seems like there's just literally 3 world-class world-ending events happening simultaneously. All 3 sets of heroes have to, come together Avengers style, or else everything's gonna explode.
It's kind of a pile-up of different disasters all kind of coming together at once.
So, before we move on to questions, I'll just ask you 2 tidbits of things. What has been the most fun thing you've had to do for this project?
I would say the most fun thing is kind of like discovering characters. When I sit down and write for a character, sometimes I'll be going on a character that I have no previous investment in, to be frank. When I'm working with a number of different characters, I won't name much in the way of names. Like, for example, when I was doing fanfic, and I wrote a fanfic for Caesar and Enderbit, and those are not 2 characters who I would have thought of as characters I like. They're not characters I attach to on any initial level. But when I was thinking of writing, I was thinking of characters and thinking of how they'd interact, and I realized that Caesar and Enderbit would have this kind of buddy cop thing going, and that made them.
Would.
And realizing how they'd interact between themselves with this kind of jokey robot and this human who's very serious and who's much more robot-like than Enderbit is. That was an interesting dynamic, and that was a fun dynamic to play with. So
for sure. I mean, those are probably my 2 favorite Sanghalis. Sanghalis or Sanghalian? Sanghalis. Those are my 2 favorite Sanghalis characters, because Oren is Caesar is literally just Oren from Final Fantasy. And Enderbit essentially acts like Spider-Man from the Spider-Man comics, right? All he does is constantly quip and joke and say one-liners. And yeah,
I wouldn't go that far, but he's definitely fairly lighthearted. He's certainly more lighthearted than anybody else in the Reliquary. Almost everybody in this Reliquary is stone-faced, and he is a very good character to have there, because he can be the one character who says the fun thing.
Yeah, he breaks tension, because everybody else is a serious boy.
Yeah.
A way too serious boy. All right, Julian, what's the most challenging thing you've had to do for this project?
Really, I think, the challenging thing is just taking a lot of the parts that were out there and trying to make them fit together, and trying personally not to run too roughshod over previously existing lore. There will definitely be changes coming out of this, but for the most part, I wanted to look back at somebody's profile that I did earlier and kind of go, yeah, that's still pretty much true. But another thing is just generally sitting down and with characters in Devastation, I'm trying to remember exactly how many. There's 32, 34.
There's 30 and then 32 in the new edition if we add Gar and K.
Yeah. And I think I used one of the promos in there too. And trying to give them all a cool moment. And and I know, and Brad would probably say to me this, don't worry about getting every character in there, but I'm a fan, and I'd like to as a fan, I'd like to have other fans see their character in the story, and even if it's not a major part, they got to do something cool. They got a moment to shine.
Yeah, for sure.
And because there will be that one person that loves that one particular character, I want to make sure that they can, if we ever sit down and do this all as a narrative where you can see all the moving parts, which probably won't happen in a rulebook storyline, but when you look at the Grand Chronicle, you can go, oh, my character did this, and that was cool.
Yeah.
And that's been the hardest thing, but it's also something I really want to do, so.
Oh, well, good luck, Julian, because I firmly believe that you have a large task ahead of you, and I know that you'll be able to do it. Well, however, I do still think you need luck, because there's over 100 characters you have to integrate into stories, and I think that will be insane. Let's move on to fan questions. So since this is Lore Minute, and you're Lore Demigod, I asked our fans to give us some questions about lore, and now you have to answer them. You have no choice.
Yeah,
you can't be like Brad and go I pass. Right? Because Brad does that sometimes when we do these lore segments. Well, you don't get that privilege.
I will give answers. I will not, promise they'll be satisfactory, but I will give you answers. So,
all right. So somebody asked, what's the lore behind the dummy and the base art? I don't think they mean I don't think they mean the dummy that's in BattleCon Online. I think they mean the red and blue stop sign guys.
I think they mean the little kind of like blank faced silhouette that you're the carrot that are beating each other up.
Yeah, the blue and red guys.
Yeah, and those are, I mean, there's no particular lore. They're stand-ins for whatever characters are playing. So the reason they're blank faces, so you can superimpose everything over in your imagination. There is lore associated technically with them through Gar, who has her own set of bases that are supposed to basically be like the ancestral form of other martial arts in Indines. She's supposed to practice this ancient one that many other martial arts branched out of. There's this kind of precursor, and so that the bases kind of represent like the core of all Indines martial arts. And
that's cool, right? So those guys could literally just be like diagrams, like an avatar, like the scrolls that show the forms in a martial art.
Ancient Chinese martial arts diagrams, or like the old European medieval diagrams of how you're supposed to hold your sword, what stance you're supposed to take, all that.
Okay, what is Seth's most impressive in-universe accomplishment?
Right now, it would probably be the starting their train company. I mean, we certainly may get into more of what Seth has done. It's not, unfortunately, something he's not gotten to explore so far yet, but he is a government official, so no doubt he has done plenty of important things.
Does Cherry actually wear jeans? And if so, where does she get them?
You're talking about what's kind of an anachronistic setting. I mean, you have folks in Willot who have various guns, and people running around occasionally with energy weapons of various sorts, like of course Clint hid his shock sticks. So finding jeans somewhere does not seem like an impossibility. So you could say they were imported from Willot.
Somebody also asked, who is the biggest character in Indines? Physically. Like, not big as in like Mr. Worldwide, but more of like Mr. Worldwide, if you know what I mean.
The one that comes to mind, of course, are like some of the big boss characters like Havoc or Greyheart. Oriana is outside of the main universe, but she's probably who I think of as biggest in her true form, like you see in the Battle Quest, where you're just fighting her hands and her head.
All right. That sounds like an appropriate answer. Here's one that I find to be very interesting. I think we both should answer this, okay?
Okay.
Tell me the first character that pops into your mind when you hear the following. Is stabbing someone immoral? And their response is, not if they consent to it.
See, stabbing got me into my particular character, but adding consent changes things.
In my opinion, it's probably somebody like an unfeeling character, like a character without emotions, so probably somebody like Caesar. I probably think Caesar would do it.
Yeah, Caesar is just not real hung up on the temporal nature of people suffering. He's not a bad guy per se, but
yeah, like one life is just but the drop in a bucket. He's that kind of character, right?
I think it depends on the situation, how much trouble he thinks it is, but if I think it's important to do, then he would absolutely do it.
So here's the next one. Is stabbing someone immoral? And then the response is, yes?
I think Mergerum probably comes to mind as just kind of somebody who, well, she'll stab people if she thinks they deserve it. I'm trying to think of...
Here's my answer. It's Clive.
Yeah. Clive comes to mind. Tatsumi came to mind.
Oh, Tatsumi comes to mind too. Kavri. How about Kavri?
Oh, absolutely. Kavri would not stab people. At least I presume.
Sure, she's literally a healer.
I don't think we have the deep lore of Kavri worked out, so maybe she has a dark secret that Brad has not let me know. But yeah.
So here's the last one. Is stabbing someone immoral? And then the answer is depends on who you're stabbing.
I would say that kind of almost defines a majority of the cast, but comes to mind is Schechter.
Schechter.
Oh, yeah.
I like that.
I mean, she has a very strong sense of, I suppose, justice in her own way that is extra legal in most situations. So.
In my opinion, it's Eligor, because Eligor is literally a Templar, so it's his sense of justice is really just defined by who his king tells him he should stab or not.
Well, he's also a very faithful person, so it has to do a lot with what his precepts are, and what he thinks.
And his religion.
Yeah, his religion and his duty to occasionally stab people because they're bad to other people.
Okay, so somebody asks, who is the canonically weakest character?
I'm trying to...
I mean, I already have an answer for this.
I'm trying to think of the name of the bartender, because...
Boris Romaldi.
Boris, yes, because he pretty much exists inside of the card so has to get punched in the face. And I can't think... there are probably other characters who are similarly weak, but as somebody whose sole role in a game is to get punched in the face, it's not a good look.
I'm sorry, Julian. Mm-hmm. If that's your reasoning for picking Boris, then you should have picked Disposable Dave.
Yeah. He's pretty much on the same position, except
it's even worse.
He gets hurt worse, and it can be left up to the listener whether or not it's better to be hurt and survive all the time, or get killed. Well, basically get mortal wounds that you survive all the time, or nearly die.
So he's kind of like, I feel so bad for Disposable Dave.
It's an interesting gimmick, and when I was doing fanfic for the contest, he was definitely on my short list was to do one of Disposable Dave.
I mean, his name is literally Disposable Dave.
Yeah.
Like, how bad could you get? At least Boris is a bartender. He's literally just a disposable guy.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Well, I was thinking, I wanted to kind of explore a relationship with him and Gerard, and why he keeps basically going into a job that is probably going to get him nearly killed. So...
Okay, here's the next question. Just how long was Berman hanging out waiting for someone to show up at the Cytheria of Blackwind? Or was he just commuting to the Ancient Artifacts resting place for his day job? And if he was commuting, was he flying there in dragon form?
Well, I suppose it depends on how long, if he was waiting at all, but I'd have to look back at Trurius's lore. He certainly has reason to occasionally take trips to Abelau, or one of the few places that probably would not kill him for being a dragon, but is admittedly something I'd probably have to research a little more and see what the original text says.
The ancient text. Really, The real question is, why is everybody in the right place at the right time for story beats to happen? It's as if stories happen because characters are just in specific places at specific times. Yeah,
sometimes you just have to go, this is genre fiction, and sometimes improbable things will happen, and that's okay.
Game of Thrones, Season 8. Okay. Sorry, I misread that question. The real question was, did he run into turbulence on his dragon's descent? It was a pun. I hate you, Daniel. Thank you so much.
With Berman, I imagine the turbulence would be whoever he's landing on. But
just how powerful is the infirmary at Argent? Because I hit the kid with an inferno, and he didn't even miss lunch.
I would imagine it's probably one of the best magical infirmaries in the world in the setting. I can't imagine outside maybe Sangolum that there are many other places that would have a infirmary that good, because they are on the cutting edge of divinity magic.
I see. So if you had to get shot at any place, it would be at Argent.
Yeah. It would probably be a pretty decent place, presuming that they have a decent reason to heal you, and they probably do. So.
Yeah, I forgot, right? Argent is a state, and they only do things that benefit them, but hey, it's fine.
Yeah. I think as long as you aren't some type of terrible monster, it's probably fine.
I mean, they do harbor dragons.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that's interesting in Indines as a world is that there aren't really much in the way of evil races per se. That people tend to be individuals, and there may be some races that are more dangerous or more potentially troublesome. But in general speaking, people are people. Wherever they come from.
I mean, yeah, for sure. Look, literally, we have a race of shadow people who literally exist to stab you in the back, and some of them are good. And then we have a literal race of angel people who resurrect and can cast you healing magic, and some of them are basically evil.
Yeah.
So,
well, I would also clarify with the Ras, with the people from the Plane of Shadow. They exist to scare the bejesus out of you.
Oh, they're jump scare monsters.
Yeah, I mean they might do that through stabbing people if they think that will scare people worse, but they don't have to, and most of them won't necessarily. But they're kind of like boogeymen in that sense, where they kind of feed off of people's negative emotions and fear.
Wait a minute, are you telling me that the Plane of Shadows is literally Monsters, Inc.?
Not literally, but figuratively, perhaps.
What is Wardlaw's power level? is the belt that he wears just a confidence-boosting placebo, or is it actually a powerful artifact? I can answer this. It's actually a powerful artifact. The Belt of Beatdown allows Wardlaw to entice a frenzy in his vicinity, essentially making it so that he can challenge anyone to a fight and that person is compelled to fight him. And then, when he beats that person, he absorbs their power.
Yeah.
So Wardlaw can actually become the strongest in the world so long as he keeps beating people of increasing strength.
Yeah. And certainly he's not the only character who has something like that going on. But yeah, no, it's in theory we have not explored the Belt of Beatdown too much, but in theory it lets him absorb the powers wherever he fights, according to legend. So.
But also, the Belt of Beatdown is literally just a joke on Street Fighter lore, but fine. You know? If you're still looking for questions, here's my last question. How many pieces of the Machine God has Enderbite found, and what will happen when he collects them all?
Well, that's probably. I would say that's definitely something that gets answered in Devastation. Perhaps not exact numbers, but him dealing with collecting that and his storyline is important to his storyline. I don't know if we'll ever document all the specific pieces because there's only so much time to put this together, but. Let's just say that he does have at least a chance of achieving his goal.
Julian gave you the correct answer, but here's the real answer. There were 7 parts, he collected all 7, he brought the Machine God back to life, and he got a wish. That's it, he got a wish.
Yes.
He was able to wish.
The Machine God balls.
The Machine God balls, exactly. This is actually, Indines is just actually Dragon Ball with like a lightly reskin. This might come as a shocker to you, Julian, as somebody who's been doing the lore a lot, but Hikaru is just Goku. So if you really think about it that way...
Actually, the correct answer is 514, and he has 626.
Oh my god.
They're stories, we can do arbitrary numbers, so...
Yeah, that's fair. You know what? I'm done with this episode of the New Level Cap podcast. I want to thank you all so much for listening. I want to also thank my special guest...
Julian Kulik, also known as Arbco, and I'm the kind of lore coordinator at Level 99 Games.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much for sending us all of your questions. As usual, that's been me, your host, Mark DeSantos, also known as Mechanic Rick, and with me has been Julian, and I really hope that you all enjoyed listening to this episode. If you like it, share it with a friend, and if you hate it, share it with an enemy. Without much else to say, thank you so much for listening, and thank you, World of Indines. Thank you, and good night.
Good night.
The New Level Cap podcast is produced by Level 99 Games. Join us next Wednesday for more design talk and shenanigans. Thank you for listening.